The boy who always left the classroom. The rain fell steadily against the windows of St. George's Secondary School, drumming a dull rhythm that seemed to seep into the bones of room 11. The air smelled faintly of wet coats, pencil shavings, and the sharpness of disinfectant that never quite left the classrooms. At the front, Mr. Clark stood tall, chalk dust clinging to the sleeves of his tweed jacket. His voice carried across the room as he explained the balancing of chemical equations, each word precise, each stroke of his marker deliberate on the board. The room was hushed except for the scratch-scratch of pens and the occasional cough. At the very back, half hidden by the taller boys, sat David Thompson, 15 years old. Tall, yes, but too thin, his uniform hanging loosely on his shoulders. His brown skin looked pale under the fluorescent lights, his eyes shadowed by tiredness far beyond his years. Beside him, as always, rested his faithful companion, a battered blue water bottle never far from his reach. That morning, before he left the house, his mum's voice had followed him out the door like a shadow. "David, remember, keep drinking. Don't let yourself dry out. You know what happens." And he did know. Dehydration wasn't just thirst for him. It was a trigger, a doorway to agony. It meant his blood could thicken, those crescent-shaped cells clogging together, cutting off oxygen. It meant pain so sharp it could make him collapse in the middle of the night, begging his mother to rush him to the hospital. It meant morphine drips, IV fluids, and long nights in wards that smelled of antiseptic and despair. Water was his shield, his lifeline. But shields come with burdens, and his burden was the endless, humiliating trips to the toilet. Halfway through the lesson, the first pang hit him, a dull heaviness low in his stomach. He shifted in his chair, trying to ignore it. His hand tapped nervously on the desk, pen clicking against the paper. He told himself to hold on. But the urge sharpened, insistent. David clenched his jaw. Slowly he raised his hand. "Sir, can I use the toilet?" The room fell still. All eyes slid to him. Mr. Clark paused mid-sentence, marker dangling in the air. His lips pressed into a thin line, his gaze sharp and unyielding fixed on David. "Again, David?" His voice carried that edge of disbelief that cut deeper than a shout. "You went 20 minutes ago. At this rate, you'll miss the entire lesson." And then came the laughter, that cruel ripple that rolled through the rows of desks like a spreading fire. "He just wants to get out of work," one boy muttered. "Always running off, isn't he?" Another snickered. David felt heat crawl up his neck, burning into his ears. He stood, head down, and walked out, ignoring the snickers that followed him like shadows. In the restroom, the cracked mirror reflected a boy he barely recognized. Hollow eyes, sharp cheekbones, lips pressed tight to stop them trembling. He splashed water on his face, gripping the sink as though it were the only thing holding him upright. "They think I'm weak," he whispered. "They think I'm lazy. But they don't know. They don't know what it cost me just to sit in that chair." He thought of the nights spent curled on hospital beds, bones and joints screaming with pain. He thought of the needles, the IV drips, the morphine haze. He thought of the fear, never knowing if his body would betray him again. "If only they knew," he said softly. "If only they knew that every sip of water is me fighting for my life." When he returned to room 11, test papers had already been handed out. Mr. Clark barely glanced at him. Whispers rose again, sharp, cruel, careless. "He's faking it. Doesn't want to work." David bent over his desk and wrote, swallowing every word he wanted to scream. At lunch, he found himself in the nurse's office. Mrs. Patel handed him a cup of water. "You did what you had to," she said gently. "They all think I'm lazy," he muttered. Mrs. Patel's eyes softened. "They don't see what you carry, David." But maybe it's time they did that afternoon. Mrs. Patel stood at the front of room 11, David by her side. "Class," she began, "today your lesson isn't about chemistry. It's about people. Some battles are invisible. David lives with sickle cell disease. That means his blood can't flow properly. It means pain worse than anything you've known. It means he must drink water constantly. And yes, it means he has to leave class more than most. When you laugh at him, you're not laughing at laziness. You're mocking survival." The room fell silent. The smirks faded. A few students lowered their heads, ashamed. Mr. Clark shifted, his face tight with guilt. He cleared his throat. "David, I was wrong," he said quietly. "I should have understood before I judged." "I'm sorry," David blinked, surprised, then gave the smallest of nods. Mrs. Patel let her gaze sweep across the class. "Let this be your lesson. Never assume. Never mock what you don't understand. Kindness costs nothing. But cruelty can break a person already carrying more than you'll ever know. But lessons don't end with words." For the rest of the week, the classroom was different. Each time David left, the silence was heavy. The boys who once laughed found themselves staring down at their desks, shame pressing on their shoulders. A few tried to mutter apologies in the hallway, but David only gave a tired nod, too drained to open wounds again with explanations. As for Mr. Clark, the guilt weighed harder than he expected. One evening, while marking papers, he caught himself staring at David's neat handwriting. He remembered the bitterness in the boy's eyes. That night, for the first time in years, Mr. Clark couldn't sleep, not because of papers or lessons, but because of the memory of a boy silently fighting a battle he had dismissed. And that was the consequence. The students learned that their laughter had power to wound deeper than they ever intended. Mr. Clark learned that authority without compassion is dangerous, and David carried on, water bottle in hand, still fighting, but no longer completely unseen. That evening, as rain streaked the Birmingham streets, David sat quietly beside his mum in the car. "Rough day?" she asked. He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Not as rough as before." And for the first time in a long time, David felt a little lighter. Because survival wasn't weakness, and now, finally, others had seen it for what it really was, not escape, not laziness, but courage. Lesson. The students carried the weight of their laughter, realizing shame is its own consequence. The teacher carried the weight of guilt, learning that words from authority can cut deeper than insults from peers. And David carried on, teaching them all that unseen battles deserve respect, not ridicule.